Well, greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome to tonight's second half. Before we jump into it, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below, the merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost you a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go, and folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into tonight's second half, shall we? Today's first part of the upload is an absolutely terrifying news article I stumbled across about a particular piece of land in Africa. When I'm done sharing this with you, you will realize why I think it is so terrifying of a news article. Mount Nagani is one mountain that is feared by most people that live in the eastern highlands, where a number of people have disappeared without a trace. They say it is a sacred highland. Mount Nagani is known just like other places around the world, like the Bermuda Triangle, the Devil's Triangle of Japan, that have formed a part of pop, paranormal, or ghost-like studies for decades. However, mountains generally seem to play a greater role as sites for mysterious disappearances, more than other sites. Two girls who were hardly teenagers, daughters of the former government official Ticha Endipi, Messiah, disappeared on Mount Nagani in 1981. Despite the massive searches using helicopters, they have never been found. Vanishing on this mountain is neither a myth nor a legend. It is real. There's a long-held belief by the Maniika people living around the area that say a vindictive spiritual presence on the mountain is responsible for the disappearances. They say had parents sought ancestral spiritual help from the elders, the children, who were said to be in a state of suspension, Chimdaza would have returned. Hardly 5 years later, an 8-year-old tourist called Robert Aughurst vanished in that mountain. He too has since not been located. Barely 2 weeks ago, a local tourist of Asian descent disappeared on this mountain, where he'd gone hiking with friends and family. Zad Dada, age 31, was in the company of his wife and another couple when they climbed halfway up the mountain. The couple and his wife gave up while Zad proceeded alone. He was nowhere to be found. What exactly is the story behind these disappearances? Between 1984 and 85, I had an opportunity of discussing the mysterious surrounding Mount Nagani when I was an information officer for the Mutar district. Everyone I spoke with about Mount Nagani had to be approached with great caution. Mountain climbers were urged to seek permission from elders living around the area before venturing into the deep thickets. The mountain can change into all sorts of weather, from bright and sunny to a foggy, cloudy, and dewy terrain in a day. I recall refusing to accompany a journalist, the late Simumo Mubai, and the news crew up there, and chose to remain at the foot of the mountain. A senior government official in the early 80s said he once got lost for nearly 4 days when he was a young man, but when he was eventually found, it was as if he had been missing for just a few hours. He said he was not hungry, nor did he show any signs of fatigue or dehydration. Traditional leaders in that area apparently played a major role in his reappearances because some cultural rites had been performed to appease the spirits surrounding this mystical mountain. It is also believed that this mountain could have swallowed many fighters during the War of Liberation. All of these cases seem to point to the fact that these people would have wandered off in different directions and got captured by an invisible inhabitants of the mountain. It has hence become very difficult to talk about Mount Nagani without mentioning the mysterious and magic surrounding this vast natural wonder. Mount Nagani is no doubt infamous for common and unexplained human disappearances. The mountain is the highest in Zimbabwe, standing at 2,592 meters, or 8,504 feet. Say when you come across a strange, colorful snake, a smoldering clay pot with no fire in sight, or a brick of gold, it's best to pretend that you've seen nothing and move on. It's also clearly stated in a book by Cliff McGowan, the grandson of Sir Robert McGowan, who was highly respected High Court judge in the Rhodesian title, The Legend of Mount Nagani, which was based on a mysterious disappearance on that mountain. Psychic research has in recent years become accepted even by the police detectives as an option in solving these mysteries worldwide. However, a reader using the name Musori, who commented on the story about the latest disappearances on the standard website, came up with good suggestions which authorities should consider. He said there's a need to establish a procedure where all tourists are taken on a guided trail by a local climber and know the terrain very well, and all tourists and guides are mandated to wear reflective jackets locally available. Climbers, or their guides, must have simple tools such as a whistle, bell, yes, you heard me right, to raise an arm if need be. Try to set up a well-known common trail to make search and rescue operations easier by limiting them to a smaller geographic area. Such a trail can be paved by local granite along the way. Even if we paved only 10 meters a year, eventually we'd get to the top. If we started in 1980, we would have done 330 meters or 1,100 feet by now. And this does not require any financial investment at all. Each visitor can be encouraged to collect a single boulder and place it on the trail on each visit. This idea sounds ridiculous and crazy. Well, find out a little bit about the Great Wall of China, Missouri said. So, we've got this crazy, mysterious mountain. Are there cryptids living on it? Probably. Are they the cause of the disappearances? Quite possibly. But yet, could there be a portal on there? I mean, they're comparing it with the Bermuda Triangle, the Devil's Triangle of Japan. Quite possible. Interesting thing that was stated right in the article was granite. Very weird. Very weird indeed, my friends. I don't know. Anyway, moving on. Today's second part of the upload. My grandparents purchased a cabin in western North Carolina in 1991. The property is about 4 acres and backs up to the Nantahala National Forest on 3 sides. The cabin is off a dirt road that has campsites all down it until you reach the main road on the other end. It's a long dirt road, so there are many free campsites. As my grandparents aged, they quit making the trip there. and taking care of the property was almost impossible for my grandfather alone. No one else in the family wanted the responsibility of it, so I jumped on the opportunity to own it. I've been going there for weeks on end since I was born to hike, fly fish, and learn about the land, and recently care for a home and property. I've spent many nights there totally alone with the dogs, or more recently now, my 18-month-old tags along. I've never felt afraid, and I've never feared the woods or critters in them. I have a healthy respect for the wild, but never a fear. I took full control about 3 years ago, and it was empty for roughly 5 to 6 years before that. Needless to say, my husband and I had put some very serious time, money, and labor to get it back to livable conditions. As we finally reached that point, we started inviting people to stay with us for weekend trips and vacations. My husband's friend Benji came to visit us one weekend while my husband, mom, cousin, and 2-month-old were staying there as well. Benji planned on setting up a camp down the road, and we convinced him to at least stay and camp in the parking area, so we would be close. There's 0 cell service at the cabin and surrounding area. I put the baby down to sleep for the night, and we all sat on the porch, totally surrounded by the woods. The moon was out, and there was enough cabin light to see all around the home. We were shooting the shit, telling jokes and old stories, when out of nowhere, even with us being loud and goofy, the deepest, angriest yell/growl came from the woods. I can only explain it as an unthinkably large man yelling in pure anger or absolute disgust. It was definitely on the property, but it wasn't close enough for us to see anything or hear footsteps or other movements. My cousin, a 55-year-old woman that grew up in the backwoods of Alabama, turned white as a sheet and ran inside to sit with the baby without saying a word. My husband quickly grabbed every gun we owned, and we stood quietly without dressing what just happened, totally freaked out. I was trembling, the hair on my neck stood straight up, and I was in the cliché mama bear protection mode. Not a minute later, I noticed something even scarier than the noise itself. Now, as a side note, the forest, woods, whatever you want to call them, is loud during the summer in the southeastern U.S., sometimes damn near deafening. The bugs are screaming, birds making noise at night sometimes, animals scurrying around in the leaves. You get the idea. Well, after this thing howled or growled or yowled, like I've never heard before, the forest went silent. I'm telling you, I could hear my heartbeat in my brain. It was so silent. Not a single peep from a bug, no critters moving, nothing dared make a noise after that thing made its presence known. We decided, after hearing what I can only describe as Lucifer incarnate, we should move our activities inside for the rest of the night and lock up tight. Even though the cabin is mostly made up of big windows or doors, not the safest thing ever, Benji decided to sleep on the couch, as he was too terrified to go outside the rest of the night. Probably a good call, and sentiment shared by us all. We researched noises of every animal known to the region, and even some that weren't native there. Nothing came even remotely close to what this sucker sounded like. We don't even go to the cabin without rifles anyways, but we make sure to pack enough ammo to attempt to take down one demon now. Nothing has happened to us personally since, but I told the closest neighbor about it finally. I was afraid that they would really think I was insane, and she told me it was a booger from Booger Hollow. She said her dad used to tell her a story while they were out camping, but she can't remember it. Guess we'll never know. Today's third part of the upload. As a policeman, I spend a lot of time dealing with things that scare people, things they can't or don't want to try and explain. I'm usually the person that gets the call to go check things out that go bump in the night. Add in the fact that I work alone usually, in the middle of nowhere. I've ran across and seen some things I can't rightly explain.
This is probably the first time in my career I had been in a supernatural situation. It happened before in life, but cop-wise, it was the starting point of what had turned out to be a very interesting career. One night on the tail end of July, I was cruising back country roads trying to find some kind of trouble to get into. As the only deputy out in the county that night, I had been busy up to that point. Then the calls had slacked off right around midnight. I hadn't seen a single soul for the last few hours and decided I would try and be proactive just for a bit. The night was hot. I had the window rolled down. I'd been driving for a few hours straight with no luck of finding anything. The only thing I had scared up was a few rabbits and a fox. I decided to stop, stretch my legs, and answer nature's calling. I pulled to a stop in a particular empty lot in the country. I had driven the road a few times. It was mostly old abandoned farmhouses and barns. No one lived out there. And it made a good target for thieves trying to steal copper or whatever they could get their hands on. The left side of that road was nothing but cornfields as far as the eye could see. It was getting pretty close to harvest time. The stalks were close to 7 or 8 feet, just a sea of green. On the right side of the truck was an old abandoned apple orchard. I never did get the full story of how the land became abandoned. It had something to do with multiple mistresses, multiple wills, illegitimate children, and other nonsense. The result of which was 150 acres of fruit trees that had become its own little forest over the 20-so years it had been unattended. Now I'm just sitting in the truck, head laid back, just enjoying my little break. I closed my eyes for a second. When I opened them, I looked out to the cornfield and made direct eye contact with something. At first I thought it was a person, and almost gave me a heart attack right there. The thing stood about 7 feet tall. Its eyes were human, but they shone in the night like animal eyes. I'm not a weak man. I've done more stupid and foolish things in my time than I care to remember. I'd been afraid before, and I'm not above admitting it. There was something about those eyes that absolutely terrified me, though. So I did what any normal, insane, 22-year-old dumb kid would do. I chased it. I kept eye contact on the thing. I slowly rolled up my window, and without braking, I checked out with dispatch over the radio, grabbed my patrol rifle off its mount above me. I remember taking a deep breath and then throwing the door open and jumping out of the truck, yelling, "Sheriff's office," in the most authoritative voice I could muster. I maintained eye contact for the entire time, except right as my vision crossed the A-pillar of the driver's side. As soon as my boots touched the dirt of the road, the creature was gone. I caught nothing but a blur as black or brown shape vaulted across the road and ran into the trees. Once again, I let my sense of self-invisibility get the better of me. I kicked the door closed on the truck and took off after it, yelling, "Stop." I stumbled into the forest and was hit by the most overpowering odor. It was a combination of unwashed person, body odor, musk from an animal. I still remember the smell vividly after all these years. I've been around rotting bodies that didn't impact me as much as this did. I've never seen or never been a particularly fast runner. I've not cared much for it and always been more of a short burst kind of guy. Whatever I was going after was fast, though. It didn't dawn on me until much later that it was probably just playing with me, leading me further into the miniature forest. I would catch a black blur moving off into the distance. I'd hear a branch break or a sound off to the side. I stumbled around like this for a good 15 minutes before my bravado and adrenaline wore off, and I decided I should head back to the truck because I'm alone and scared at this point. The whole way back, I had that itch between my shoulder blades like I was being watched, like I was the intruder in someone else's domain. I made it out of the trees and back to the truck. It was in the same place I had left it, but driver's side door was open, dome light on, vehicle turned off with the key in the ignition. I knew I hadn't locked the door, but I knew I left it running. I often don't turn my truck off during the shift. I checked the truck to make sure it was empty. That same smell filled the cab of the truck. It was in the seats and carpets, like something sat in my seat and just wallowed around in it. I started the truck and got out of there as fast as I could. I didn't tell anybody about this. I just told dispatch I thought I had saw something. Turned out to be nothing and left. Around a year later, during one of those few times I rotated to days, I had a partner to work with. I was driving around on the opposite side of the county. I had just cleared a little cattle call, playing cowboy, pushing back some steers into the fence, when my partner called me, wanting to know where I was. He was scared, and I could hear it in his voice. I let him know where I was, and he asked if I could meet him down in the southwest part of the county. There was an old gin down there. It just happened to be in the same general area of my encounter a year prior. I had never told him about it, but I agreed to meet him. The story I got from him was he pulled into the same cornfield from a year earlier, not too far from where my story took place. He had backed into a little turn row and used to maintain the pivot. He decided to stop there and get a few minutes of rest. It was Sunday morning. Like most of our Sundays, nothing would really happen until after lunch when people started to get active. My partner had dozed off for a few minutes and must have woken by his truck being violently shook back and forth with a dust cloud dissipating around him. He first thought it was me just messing with him. When he got out to check, he told me he smelled the nasty animal odor. Not finding anything out of the ordinary, he went back to get in his truck and drove away. He drove down to the gin, got out, and walked around the place to make sure no one was there. When he went to get back in his truck, he noticed a handprint on the top of his window. Now, anyone who has ever driven a truck down a dirt road will tell you handprints on a vehicle fill with dust and stand out. He saw the print, freaked out, and called me. Right over his head on the top part of the door, the cab of the truck, was the biggest handprint I had ever seen in my life. I have average hands for my size. This was easily bigger than two of my hands. I told him my story. He described the smell nearly as I did. Neither of us ever found out what was living down there. I heard a few more stories over there in time. I even ran across a guy who convinced me it was the West Texas version of Bigfoot. I would answer a few suspicious person calls around the area over the next few years. I always kept an eye out, but never had another encounter like I did that night, though. Today's fourth part of the upload. I've seen this creature that resembles a werewolf on my family farm here in rural southwest Michigan. I'll start by explaining the property layout. The farm sits on 30 acres of woods, creek, marshlands. All of my encounters have come this year, 2016, from February to about a month or so ago, early June. The first came in or about the 8th of February at approximately 3:52 a.m. A heavy winter storm was hitting the area with some nasty weather. I was up early to get a jump on the snow shoveling, so the driveway was accessible for the propane delivery guy later that morning. As I was about halfway down the driveway, I heard a loud splash in the creek to the south, about 25 yards away. Thinking it was a deer or two, I stopped shoveling and scanned the creek and the wood line for any movement. As I scanned the creek, I came to the wood line and saw this pair of yellowish amber eyes, about 7.5 to 8 feet tall, standing right next to a huge oak. It took off with a super burst of speed to the west. It then leapt into the air, and all I heard for the next few seconds was the treetops clinging against one another. It was like it was running inside the treetops. I stood there for a few minutes questioning my insanity. For the next 6 to 7 seconds, I saw this creature. It stood on 2 legs that looked like dog's hind legs. It had a big wolf-like head with a snout and ears that resembled that of a German shepherd. and those yellowish amber-colored eyes. The second sighting came around March 24th at about 2:38 p.m. I decided to walk up the creek and clear some brush. I always carry a firearm with me on these occasions. I'd gotten about 450 yards up the creek that flows through the entire acreage of the property. It was strange to me how completely quiet it was. I'll just say dead the woods were. I always jump something up, whether it's a deer or turkey or duck. They're always there. I didn't even hear any birds, which was very strange. This spooky phenomenon of utter silence developing the area of anomalous events is known as the Oz factor and is quite common in creature encounters. It was named for a British author and investigator, Jenny Wrens, after a strange alternate kingdom portrayed in L. Frank Baum's book, The Wonderful World of Oz. It refers to the same type of disorientation experienced by Baum's protagonist Dorothy after a tornado transported her from black and white world to the realm of color. It was a brilliant way for the movie to portray Dorothy's transition from the known to the unknown, and works equally well. Describe the Oz factor. To those who have experienced it, it's often described that all the birds and insects go quiet, as a change in the surrounding atmosphere affects their emotions. People have either felt profound sadness or paralyzed with terror. Sometimes the air seems to change, often to green or gold. I rounded the bend to the creek when up ahead, about 55 yards, was what looked like the back of a black bear that was digging into the bank of the creek. As I was setting my firearm down on one of the little islands in the creek, I snapped a branch, and it stopped completely. I froze and watched as this thing stood on two legs and started to turn around towards me. It stood 8 feet tall with a huge wolf-like head, snout, and ears of a dog, all black fur. In the first encounter, the creature's fur was gray with some white. This one was all black. It kept glancing over to the east and then back towards me. It had not yet seen. It put its snout in the air and looked like it was sniffing the wind. I'm completely freaked out at this point. Grab my firearm and get out of the area quickly. When there was a splash in the creek, I looked up, and now this thing's on all fours. It still stood 5.5 feet tall. At this point, I didn't want to run out of fear that it would give chase, so I stayed frozen. It looked at me and snarled, and I thought it was sizing me up, and then all of a sudden it looked to the east again, back at me once more, and took 2 giant leaps toward the east, and then onto the bank of the creek. That's about 25 feet in distance. It then jumped toward the treetops and disappeared to the east. I stood there in total disbelief. I got home, my mind was racing, so I decided to confide to my father about what I saw. He looked at me as if I was an alien, said I was crazy and I should get my head checked. I know what I saw, Dad. The third and final encounter came on May 29th, 8:52 p.m. My dad and I were having a fire down by the creek, and we're just getting low on wood when he asked if I could get some more wood from behind the pole barn. I hesitated for a few minutes. I was afraid of those woods, which is something I thought I'd never say. After about 10 minutes, I started to make my way towards the back of the pole barn. It's just about dark, and I keep hearing this rustling and lower growl like dogs are playing. When I reach the back of the pole barn, it stops. I light a cigarette and look out into the woods, which is 10 yards away. Again, the woods had gone completely silent. Then there was a sound like a zipper being zipped up. It was about 30 yards to the south. I waited a minute and decided to look out where I heard the sound. As I glanced to my right, I saw something move. It was just about completely dark, and there was a stench in the air. It was absolutely putrid. It smelled of rotten guts, urine. I figured it was a rotten carcass of a dead animal. And then, as I was shining my flashlight, a deep growl, like a raccoon would make, came from the area. I had heard the rustling sound, so I shone my flashlight over that way. And sound I saw about 5.5 feet off the ground, these eyes. The eyes were red in color. The thing I saw didn't have paws on the front. They were like long arms with hands and claws. It really didn't freak me out, as a lot of critters have red eyes when exposed to light. Then this thing stood up on 2 legs. This thing was very tall, 8.5 feet tall. It growled again and literally turned around and walked away to the south. I thought I shit myself. I came back home. My dad asked, "Where's the wood?" I said I didn't feel well and I was going to bed. I went out the next day and looked around. I heard the noise. I found only a deer skin. The rest of the deer was gone, including its head. Also, 2 neighbors of mine have heard eerie howls coming from my family's woods, saying they'll only come out at dusk. They've been in the area for 50+ years and said they'd never heard a sound like that. One more thing. I set apples out for deer every week and noticed the other day that all the apples were gone, and the rock was in every place where there was an apple. I have a trail cam on the area. I also found some tracks that look like a huge wolf. There used to be deer around here all the time. Had a herd of 50 or so. Now you're lucky to see 1 or 2. It's like they disappeared. Been really strange around here for the quite past few years, and I don't know what to think. In all 3 of my encounters, the thing I saw reminded me of a werewolf. I no longer go near the woods. I was told by family members that a lot of the wooded acreage is Indian burial grounds. I don't share this with very many people, fear of getting laughed at or called crazy. Today's final encounter. Summer 2015, my teenage daughter went on a running camp in Brevard. I packed up her sisters, age 1 and 7, and her and we made the all-girls road trip from Florida up to the mountains. It was a great trip, and we had a wonderful time. A friend here in Florida offered her a cabin near Hendersonville. It was in a pretty remote area up on a mountain that took some doing to get into with my minivan. There were other houses/cabins in the area, but a bit of walking distance from the cabin. That was a little off the end of the dirt road, with woods surrounding it almost entirely. After the girls and I dropped off their sister, we visited a friend and cashiers for the night with no problems. The next day we made our way to the cabin, shopping for groceries on the way. The plan was to stay for the week and then pick my daughter up from camp, and then rendezvous with my husband and sons for another week at the cabin. We had big plans to do a lot of cool stuff while they were there. Using the cabin as our base, we got to the cabin. It's still pretty light out. Girls ran around. I unpacked the van. The cabin's about 100 years old, but had been added on to, and it's pretty decent size. 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, small kitchen, living room, large front porch, side porch. The front of the cabin was a wall-to-floor ceiling French door. There was no AC, but it wasn't terribly hot up on the mountain. This cabin had been a family retreat for my friend for many years. There was a gun safe because her husband liked to hunt. They even kept an SUV in the carport to use when they were up there. They never had any issues. After getting everything settled, we had a nice dinner, and I tried to pick up something on the TV. No cable, just local stuff for the girls to watch. The cicadas were loud. We had all the windows open and the front doors open to keep things pretty comfortable. I started shutting everything up because we couldn't hear anything at all, not even each other. That ended up being a very good thing. I left a couple of windows open in the kitchen just to let in some air. After a while, it was time to head to bed. The girls and I took the larger bedroom with the bathroom. I wanted them to be with me, even though I wasn't really being worried at this point. It just seemed the right thing to do at the time. Another thing, behind the bed was an old bookcase type headboard, and behind that was a large window. The cabin was up from the ground, so that window was quite a bit from the ground. You'd have to be a very tall person to see inside. There were curtains on the windows, but they weren't shut down, and didn't really need to be. When I was standing, I could see out into the woods. As the night fell, it got very dark where I was. I could see a light coming from the distance from the closest house. But that was it. When I say close, that's pretty relative. Close was a tenth to a quarter of a mile down the road. The girls and I had settled down, and they were both ready for sleep. It had been a long day, as always, nature calls, so I got up to use the restroom. Remembering the windows were open, I went and took care of them. On my way back to bed, a light in the window immediately caught my eye. At first, I thought I was seeing things, maybe my reflection, but the cabin was almost totally dark inside. So I stood there for a minute watching the light. It looked like the kind of light you'd wear on your head. It was a single small light. I watched it, thinking maybe it was coming from the house down the way. But then it moved. Holy shit, I thought maybe my eyes were playing tricks. I kept watching, and I was certain that it was moving. It didn't come near, it just sort of stayed in that one spot. I finally convinced myself that I was just seeing things, or it was one of the houses, so I laid back down. I was beginning to doze off when I distinctly heard something that sounded like keys dropping on the floor of the porch outside. I froze. I'm literally getting chills writing this now. I waited and listened. I didn't hear anything. Okay, maybe I'm imagining it. Then I remembered the French doors and how easily the glass can be broken and the door unlocked. Yeah, I wasn't going back to sleep. I heard other noises that I examined and analyzed in my brain. I kept telling myself it was being ridiculous. And then I heard it, distinctly scratching on the window behind me. It was it. I got my phone, called 911. I told them everything and grabbed a long knife that was lying on the dresser and immediately put myself against the bedroom door that didn't even have a lock on it. I had no access to the gun safe and unfortunately wouldn't be of any use anyway because I didn't know how to load a gun or use it. It took a while for the police to get up on the mountain, and since it sat between two counties, they sent both patrols. The whole time I'm thinking about my girls fast asleep, and if I would be able to fend off whatever this was. The police finally get there. The police look around the cabin and don't find anything. They were surprised that I was alone. That wasn't comforting. They asked if I had access to the gun. I told them no. Eventually, they left and we were alone again. I felt like an idiot. I stayed up the rest of the night with my phone in hand. I still heard noises outside of the cabin. Whenever my phone went dark, I could hear it. But then I would open it up again, and it would be light in the room. The noises stopped. I literally did. Stay up the rest of the night. And the sun came up. I was already packing. I called my husband and he set us up a hotel in Asheville. I'm done. I got my girls up, we loaded up the van, but there was this very strange, oppressive feeling in the air. We got the hell out of there as fast as we could. Unfortunately, when we got to the bottom of the mountain, I remembered the stove and had an uneasy feeling. that I had left it on after making breakfast. This is my friend's cabin, and I thought of being the cause of probably burning it down compelled me to go back. The feeling surrounding the place is still very much there. In all my life, I grew up in rural Florida, camping all the time, spending a great deal of time in the woods. Living in Ocala National Forest at one point, I was never afraid of things like that. There was definitely a sense that the girls and I were in very danger. Anytime I think about that night, I feel exactly the same way then. Writing this down has brought it all back. I know I saw that light. I don't know, it could have been a light, it could have been an eye. I know what I heard. I know what I felt. I know I will never be in a situation like that again on the Blue Ridge Mountains.
Some great information right there and some horrific encounters. I hope you all enjoyed them as much as I enjoyed sharing them with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting this channel. After all, your support is what makes this channel continue to grow and go. And honestly, what makes it a special and safe place for people to share their experiences, theories, and ideas without ridicule, judgment, and simply treated with respect. And that is all on you guys. You guys are what made that community in that comment section, and it is appreciated. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, our pets, our family, and friends. These creatures are real. They are out there, and they are dangerous. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions. Never stop searching for the truth. And God bless.